afternoon, everyone. It's Alyssa Corbin, Justin Nielsen here with a look at the stock market today. On the show, we're going to break down why it was a good thing that it was a quiet day on Wall Street today. We also have a breakout from a recent IPO, Justin, among another couple of interesting stocks that we're looking at today.
Yeah, so we'll go ahead and take a look at Joann fabric stores, Twitter rebounding as social media stocks kind of recover from what was going on with them in their corrective phase, and also looking at Caterpillar again, that rotation play that just seems like it can't stop going.
All right. Well, first, a look at the major indexes here. And Justin, while I do the setup here, it sounds like your audio is coming through your computer instead of your headset. So while you work on that, I'm going to break down the action for the major indexes. The NASDAQ fell slightly lower today, down less than 0.1%. The S&P 500 up 0.1%, and the Dow up fractionally. We also had the Russell 2000 having a little bit more of a tough time today, Justin. But give us a sense of what went down in the stock market today, broadly speaking.
Well, here's what I like. Okay, so the NASDAQ composite, which was in a corrective phase, and that was kind of having the big issue we were having with growth stocks, was a lot of that due to the NASDAQ composite and the action. It was getting stuck below that 50-day moving average line, hitting resistance there. That seems to be having resolved itself, especially since we got above that 13,600 level that we were talking about as a potential area of resistance. Once we got above that, things seem to really kind of move a lot better for a lot of the growth stocks. What I like about the action here the last couple of days is after 3 days in a row of 1.5% gains at least, the NASDAQ has just kind of settled down here. What that does for stocks is it helps kind of make some more setups. If these stocks can continue to hold on to their gains, that's a good thing. And you're seeing that action mirrored in the S&P 500. You look at SPY and, same kind of thing. Now, of course, S&P 500 was getting into new high ground much earlier because it wasn't having the issue that the NASDAQ was, as a lot of tech stocks were getting hit, and some of the real economy plays, the rotation plays, a lot of the travel names that found their way onto the S&P 500 were doing much better. Now, one thing I do want to note on the NASDAQ composite, so you said that the NASDAQ composite was down slightly, whereas the Qs, the NASDAQ 100, was actually up about 0.25%. So there does seem to be a lot more focus on those big cap names like Google and Facebook and Microsoft. Those are the heavyweights. Those are the ones that have the biggest weight. And in the NASDAQ 100, that weight is even larger. And so you are seeing the last few days, it seems like a lot more strength in the NASDAQ 100 versus the NASDAQ composite. And a lot of that is due to those big heavyweights. But let's go ahead and wrap this up with IWM, the Russell 2000. IWM, of course, is the ETF that tracks the Russell 2000, and that one has gotten back below its 50-day moving average line. So there's a lot of financial stocks in there. This is the small cap index. So this is, in the same way that we had the Russell, the S&P 500, and the Dow all kind of acting well while the NASDAQ wasn't. It'll be interesting to see if the Russell 2000, if its weakness here is something that's going to, throw a potential hurdle for us going forward.
Well, those big cap tech names, as you mentioned, Justin, getting some much deserved attention from the IBD staff as of late, pointing out the good action there. So now we want to point out the strong action that we saw in recent IPO Joann, ticker JOAN, closing up about 7% for the day and earning itself that RS line blue dot.
Yeah, and so I actually brought this up on IBD Live today, and I'll be honest with you, I got it from the Q&A. One of the subscribers was pointing out, hey, take a look at this, and that was early on, and the stock just got stronger throughout the day. And of course, with the pandemic, a lot of people, we saw these huge moves in Etsy and eBay, and a lot of these small businesses that were creating, masks. A lot of the what the pandemic has created is some pretty big do-it-yourselfers. I mean, my wife is among them. We have a lot of homemade masks. Her mother actually makes them for us. But a lot of people were kind of doing this. And again, in the Q&A, when I brought up Joann, a lot of the members in IBD Live were kind of saying, hey, look, I think half the revenue was from me personally, because they're doing a lot of this crafting, and or their kids are, a number of people were mentioning that as well. So this is a stock that's been around for a company that's been around for a long time. It was, I believe, public earlier, and now it's come public again. At the same time, you have Michaels, which is in a very similar space, MIK, that recently was going to be taken private. So that's kind of on the opposite end, something that was private going public and something that was public going private. But the retail specialty space is definitely interesting. Joann has some really great sales, and the story is that they've got a lot of small businesses that are making up the bulk of that sales revenue. So this was a stock of the day written by Adelia today, and so I would highly recommend checking that out to get some more information on it.
Yeah, that's right. And just one more note on these IPO stocks, especially when you see a breakaway gap like this, just be careful of your position size and set your stop loss accordingly.
Yes. Good point.
We also, let's pivot to Twitter. Got a lot to get through. So let's take a look at the social media stock. Definitely tested investors as of late, but it is now moving higher for, notably higher, I would say, for a second day in a row, up over 3% today, and now butting up against that 70 level.
Well, and here again, the relative strength line, we've been saying this for a while, the relative strength line is comparing this stock versus the S&P 500. And so it looks fairly dismal in that regard. But when you consider it versus the NASDAQ, the fact that the NASDAQ composite was really suffering below its 50-day moving average line and its 10-week moving average line for a while, the fact that this held up above that line, kind of dipped below it briefly, but got support very quickly, that looks interesting to me. And this does kind of have the look of a double bottom potentially forming here. The one thing that I would note is that first week down was pretty dramatic, and so we're going to want to see a lot of positive action here to kind of make up for that negative. It's always a balancing act of positives and negatives, and that first week down is certainly a glaring negative there. But if this rebound has been strong off the 50-day moving average line, a lot of blue bars recently, and so we'll see if this is something that can kind of settle down a little bit here, and then maybe make a run at that double bottom type pattern.
And clear this high right there.
It's a little low. That middle of the W is our buy point. It's a little bit lower than I'd like to, but that's again reflective of that really poor week, that first week.
The spirit of a double bottom, and
there we go.
A resistance level in that middle peak nonetheless. So we'll keep tabs on Twitter. And now I want to check in on Caterpillar. So from bird to cat, I guess you could say, we're checking in on this.
Well done.
Yeah, just trying to find some sort of segue. Checking in on this ascending base here forming for Caterpillar. Pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this is not something that you see very frequently, but a lot of times in these corrective phases, now granted, the S&P 500 and Dow Jones Industrial Average, which Caterpillar is a member of the Dow Jones Industrial Average, they weren't really correcting all that much. But a lot of times in these corrective phases, you will have these ascending bases, which are just kind of fighting the downtrend. And that's certainly what it seems like Caterpillar's been doing. It just is resisting any movement to the downside. It gets support really at its 21-day moving average line. That's the exponential line that you're showing there on the green line. And it seems to get support there. When you have three pullbacks with the lows each being higher than the previous low, it's getting into highs. Each high is higher than the previous high. That's kind of the look of an ascending base. And so what you'd look for, that line that you drew straight across, that's where you'd look for a breakout there. But again, this is one that you could be getting early entries into off the 21-day moving average line if you wish.
Very good point there. Yeah, it's interesting. It's not quite showing up on the weekly. Sometimes the pattern rec, because it's algorithm based. Sometimes you'll see it on the daily, not on the weekly. Sometimes you'll see it on the weekly, not on the daily, or on the daily and the weekly, but it's two different patterns.
But that's why we look at both. That's why we look at both, because sometimes there's something that will be more apparent on one rather than the other. And so it's a good idea to just, as you're doing your research, to look at both. Absolutely.
Yeah, look at all those different time frames. All right. Well, hopefully you're not sick of us, because you're going to get a lot more of Justin and Allie. We have the podcast later today, which we're going to record, a new episode dropping tomorrow. We drop one every Thursday. And then also tomorrow, Justin, we have Swing Trader Scorecard. So a lot of great content that we're just
and then next week, Chris and I are going to be doing a webinar on Tuesday. So that's coming up too. So there's going to be quite a bit of educational information. That one's going to be on ETF strategies. It's going to be sponsored by Innovator. And we've got some interesting things to talk about with them as well.
That we do. So you can register for that easily by just typing investors.com/webinar. So make sure to do that, and we'll see you back here tomorrow. Thanks for watching.